Hello and welcome back to the class. Today we will go over the introduction chapter in your textbook. Uh, so let's first start with the definition of what is earth science. A science that collectively seeks to understand earth and its surrounding space, and it borrows information from these four major fields: geology, oceanography, meteorology, and astronomy. So earth science itself is a collectively it seeks information from these four major fields of science to better understand earth and its surrounding space. Geology. What is geology? Geology is a science which tries to explain the natural processes that occurs around and above the surface of Earth. So natural processes such as rainfall, the wave action in the ocean, earthquake events, volcanic eruptions, wind, and changes in weather. All those events that we see around us, the earth, the way we see the earth around us, how does it came into existence like this? Was earth always like this? So all these questions that we answer with the help of science of geology. Some of the specific questions that I listed here are how mountains form, why oils are found in certain types of rocks, what causes earthquake and volcanic eruption. So all these kind of how something has happened, that comes under the realm of physical geology. So there are two types of geology: physical geology and historical geology. So physical geology tries to explain how something happened, and historical geology tries to explain when something happens. So the more about the timeline of the events, different major events that happened in geology or in geological events. So historical geology, it scientifically explains the origin and evolution of Earth and stars. So it talks about at different timeline the major events that occurred. Physical geology tries to explain how something happened. Oceanography, this is another field of science that helps earth science to explain the events that we see around us and above the surface of earth. In the definition, a study of physical, biological, geological, and chemical processes that occurs in ocean and its relationship with the earth. So in oceanography, we mostly focus on what happens inside the ocean, the habitat of ocean, what type of animals live in ocean, what is the physics and chemistry involved in the ocean that makes that habitat possible for different organisms, whether it's plants or animals, the how what makes the ocean as we see it today. So that's what we study in the field of oceanography. We look at seawater, what is the strength of seawater, what is the salinity of seawater, and then there is another very interesting process called saltwater intrusion. It generally happens in the coastal area. So, for instance, in Florida, as we know, we are surrounded by ocean and Gulf on either side. On the east side, we are surrounded by Atlantic Ocean. On the west side, we are surrounded by the Gulf of Mexico. So, on both sides, we have salty water, and the salty water is denser than the fresh water. So, the salty water is always trying to push inland into the aquifer system below the ground. So below the ground, we know that we have freshwater reservoir of aquifer, something that we use for our drinking purposes and other use as well for irrigation, for industrial applications as well. So this fresh water is very precious and we want to preserve it. We want to maintain the chemical composition, the freshness of this water in the aquifer system. But this salt water intrusion, this is the continuous force, the in the coastal region, the salty water from the ocean is always trying to push into the freshwater aquifer resource. So the freshwater aquifer resource, the freshwater is lighter than the salt water. So salt water has more density, it will try to push into that. So that is another very important environmental event that we study, which is part of oceanography. Another very important event that we study in oceanography is the ocean circulation. The ocean water, they are also very well connected. So all the ocean, whether it's Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Arctic Ocean, Mediterranean Sea, all those water, they are circulating, they are mixing around each other. So they are not stationary, but they are moving around from one ocean to another. So that whole event of circulation of water across different ocean is called as ocean circulation. Another important feature that we study in ocean is the sea floor topography, that what the sea floor look like. Is it smooth, or is there other geological uh, features that we can find in the bottom of ocean. So it is very well known that the tallest mountain exists inside within the ocean, or at the bottom of the ocean. So we know on the surface of the ocean, Himalayan mountain is the tallest mountain on the surface of the earth, but there is another mountain which lies inside the ocean and which is much taller than the Himalayan mountain. So that makes it's very interesting to understand, to study the seafloor topography. And marine life is, of course, it's very diverse. It's very rich in types of plants and animals that we found inside the ocean. So in oceanography, this is what we study. Atmosphere. This we study the dynamics of air above Earth's surface. That how so there is, just like ocean circulation, the waters are moving across different ocean. There is a air circulation pattern as well in the atmosphere. So the air is always moving around the globe, and there is this particular circulation pattern. Somewhere it goes in clockwise, in another part of the globe it goes in anti-clockwise. So we have a specific science devoted to understand these dynamics of earth, dynamics of air which is circulating around the earth's surface. So that is atmosphere. You can look at this uh, but anyway, then we also study the effect of sun and other heavenly bodies on earth. Heavenly bodies, we refer to the asteroids, comets, other planetary objects that we find in the atmosphere. That is all part of the atmospheric science. Study of weather is called as meteorology. Global warming is another very important and very hot subject in recent time, where we are seeing this change in climate, change in the global atmospheric temperature. So that also we study in the part of atmospheric time under the topic of global warming. Challenges of earth science. So earth science itself is a very challenging topic of science, and the main reason that makes it very challenging is the range of scale of time and space. So especially in the time, if you think about it, the earth itself is about 4.6 billion years old. So that gives you an idea that we are looking at when we are studying the history of earth, the major geological events. Sometimes we go all the way back to the beginning of the formation of earth, which is about 4.6 billion years. So that makes it a very wide range of time scale over which we are studying these different major geological events. Sometime we can look at a piece of rock and then we can call it fairly young, and actually when we date the age of this rock, we will find it about million of years old. So but in geological scale of time, it is still considered as fairly young piece of rock. And similarly in the case of space as well, we are looking at the entire volume of earth that we study inside earth science, not only the volume but also the surface of the earth. So the diameter, the circumference of the earth is about 40,000 kilometers or 25,000 miles. So you can imagine how big this Earth is. It's about 25,000 miles in circumference. So if you want to take a whole circle, if you want to go around the Earth, uh, then yeah, so the circumference of the Earth is about 25,000 miles, and it will take you about 40 hours, even if you are moving in a jet, which is moving at a speed of 620 miles an hour. So a jet, which is a very fast moving object, if you ride on that jet, it will take you still 40 hours just to take one circle around the Earth. So that can give you an idea how big the Earth is, and we study this whole entire planet Earth under the field of Earth science. So this can give you an idea that the scale of time and space that we study in Earth science. These two attributes, time and space, these are both extremely dynamic and continuously changing at various scale. So both time and space that we are studying are continuously changing. So you can imagine, for example, when we are looking at any mountain, suppose this mountain is built from these aggregates of rocks, and the rocks themselves are built of aggregates of minerals, and the minerals are then formed at atomic scale due to the combination of different atomic species. So we are going from very fine atomic scale, and then we are looking at hundreds of meters of tall mountain or cliff structure. So that gives you this idea of extreme dynamic and continuously changing scale of space. And similarly, when suppose we are looking at some of these chemical reaction that sometimes takes years and years of time to make any significant changes. On the other hand, sometimes they are looking at some of these geological events like earthquake events that happens within fraction of second, and that can completely change the landscape around you. So there are these very extremely dynamic nature that we are studying in earth science, and these dynamic events are changing very quickly sometime, and sometime it takes hundreds and thousands and millions of years to make any significant change. So that's why it makes it very challenging. Predictions of natural processes is extremely challenging due to involvement of multiple processes. So again, when we are talking about geological events, there are multiple processes involved, whether it is physical, biological, chemical, or geological, and at multiple scales in an extremely dynamic way. Just like I gave you an example of an earthquake event or a volcanic eruption event, those are sometimes very sudden, whether it is a volcanic eruption or earthquake event. Sometimes it's very sudden, and it can quickly change the entire landscape in a very short period of time, and that can affect the physical, biological, chemical, and geological nature of the landscape around it. Here we will now look at four major spheres on Earth. These are called atmosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. So atmosphere is first, let's talk about this figure, this image which was taken from the space. A very popular figure is called as a blue pebble. So this is what the Earth look like. If you look at this figure, it's amazing that you don't see any continent. All you see is vast ocean and all these strong wind, circulatory wind system. You don't actually see any continent. Something that we believe is very huge in the size. It's very large, very big in the size on the surface of Earth. But when we see it from a distance, from the space, we don't actually see any continent. So this again gives you an idea of the scale, that how big the Earth itself is and how comparatively small the continents are relative to the entire size of the planet and how big the oceans are. Here you can see mostly we see the oceans here on the planet of the Earth. And this is another figure here that gives you an idea about the scale of the atmosphere. So this thin layer of atmosphere which is surrounding our Earth, which makes life possible on the surface of Earth. So this thin layer, again we are talking about the scale, that how thin this layer of atmosphere is relative to the entire size or scale of the planet Earth. So atmosphere itself is about 50 miles thick, but the geosphere, which is the planet Earth, is about 8,000 miles in diameter. So this can give you some idea about the scale we are talking about, the range of scale. Sometimes the atmosphere which is only 50 miles thick, and then we are looking at the geosphere or the planet Earth, which is much larger in scale. Hydrosphere is another sphere that comprises of all the water bodies, whether on the surface of the Earth or below the surface of the Earth. That is part of hydrosphere. And the fourth sphere is biosphere, that encompasses all the living organisms, plants, bacteria, human, animals. All the living organisms that live on planet Earth are part of biosphere. So we have four major spheres on the planet Earth: atmosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. Here it is, we are looking at the interior of the planet Earth. So we have three major layers: crust, mantle, and core. Crust is the outermost layer, mantle is the middle layer, and core is the innermost, the central core of the Earth. So these are the major layers. So we will look more in detail about that. But for now, I just want you to know that the interior of the Earth is layered. It's not just a single homogeneous body in the interior of the Earth, but the interior of the Earth is layered, something like a layered cake. If you cut it, then you will find there are three layers. Based on the property of these layers, they are distinct from each other. So that's all for the introduction chapter. I want to show you one important thing from your textbook. So your textbook has these smart figures. If you turn to page 7, there's a smart figure 1.4 here, and this figure has this web link. If you type this web link, it will take you more in detail, give you some interesting fact about the geology. So this is something I want you guys to explore. Each chapter has about 4 or 5 different smart figures. So when we are going through different chapters in your textbook, please make sure that you take time to explore these web links to better understand description about these different figures. And also there are some fun facts given on different part of the chapter. Something like here, the sun contains about 99.86% of the mass of the solar system, and its circumference is about 109 times that of the Earth. Again, we are talking about the diversity of scale. The size of the sun is so much larger than the size of the Earth. That's something we thought that the Earth itself is a very large object, but when you compare it against the size of the sun, it looks like a very small object. So that's again an example of diversity of the scale that we encounter in the field of Earth science. I will be posting more links on the Canvas page to further understand these different topics. So please make sure that you browse through every web link that I post on the Canvas page. Thank you.